Hello everyone, and welcome to your complete and ultimate Raiden Shogun guide. Raiden Shogun is one of the best 5-star characters in the game, so this video is to hopefully help guide any current or future Raiden owners on how to roughly build her. As with my usual guides, this will cover all of the following in detail: general playstyles, talent overview, weapon options, artifact sets and stats, team comps, Constellation Overview, as well as an Abyss 12 showcase, all in an as condensed manner as possible for you to quickly look back upon. Chapters and timestamps are below. Just as a disclaimer, my own personal Raiden Shogun is Constellation 3, so my damage will very likely be higher than the majority of Raiden players. There will also be some clips recorded with a Constellation 0 Raiden, courtesy of my friend Jasper. Thanks to Jasper for lending me his account to record footage with. With all that out of the way, let's get right into the guide. Raiden is an extremely strong character with a very unique kit. She can be played as a main DPS, a support with sub-DPS capabilities, or as a Hyperbloom activator. First, covering her DPS playstyles, Raiden's burst has massive damage when built well, and also helps her teammates offset their energy generation during her field time by restoring energy to them when Raiden's burst slashes hit enemies. This allows her to be played both as a main DPS in teams like National and Hypercarry, or as a support for something like a Eula team, where she can both proc Superconduct as well as fill in on Eula's downtime while restoring energy to the rest of the team. Raiden's burst multipliers are extremely high, and playing her as a carry is very flexible, allowing you to use many different characters like Sarah, Bennett, Kazuha, Xiangling, or Nahida. Playing her as a carry is my personal favorite way to play Raiden Shogun. Alternatively, Raiden is one of the best Hyperbloom proccers in the game. Her skill lasts an incredibly long time and deals off-field electro damage with a deceptively large AoE, allowing her to trigger the Hyperbloom reaction very easily and reliably. Unfortunately, this playstyle does completely ignore her burst and its damage multipliers, since her skill is all that is really needed for this playstyle. That being said, this playstyle is very strong for single target scenarios and is very low investment friendly, as Elemental Mastery becomes the only stat that is important to build on Raiden. Hyperbloom also becomes much stronger if you have top tier characters like Nahida or Yelan. And again, it also helps that she doesn't require much investment to do well. Raiden is flexible, insanely strong, and can curb stomp nearly all of the content in the game with ease when built well. Her DPS also scales very well with higher investment as well as constellations, while Hyperbloom is incredibly easy to build and play for. So just pick whichever playstyle you prefer, as she can conquer any of the content in the game no matter which way you go about it. Raiden's normal attack string has 5 total hits, and they are completely unexceptional. Her charge attack does one big slash, but again, it doesn't really contribute to much of a kit. But it does make a pretty cool crescent moon shape. For all intents and purposes, I do not recommend leveling this talent at all. You can leave this at level 1 and it wouldn't really make a difference. Raiden's elemental skill is quite unique. When cast, she will deal an instance of electro damage and grants all party members the Eye of Stormy Judgment. While this eye is active, the active characters will have additional properties granted to them. Firstly, when the active character deals damage to an enemy, coordinated AoE electro damage will also be dealt. This can proc roughly every second, 0.9 seconds to be exact. Secondly, whenever the active character casts an elemental burst, their burst damage will be increased by a certain amount depending on the burst cost. This will increase in scaling up till talent level 9. The eye lasts 25 seconds and has a 10-second cooldown, making this one of the most reliable and long-lasting off-field electro abilities in the game. It is great for Hyperbloom, Superconduct, and slightly increasing other teammates' DPS in a support role. Just keep in mind that the electro applied might occasionally steal vapes if you play in something like a Raiden National. The initial cast of the skill will always apply electro, while the follow-up coordinated attacks have standard ICD. Each coordinated electro attack will also have a 50% chance of producing one electro particle. Still, I consider this talent a fairly low priority to level. The damage scaling isn't super high, and the increase to burst damage stops at level 9, so that's about as high as I would recommend one to level it to. Raiden's elemental burst is the main damaging part of the kit, so let's go over it in detail. First of all, we have to discuss her resolve. Resolve is indicated by the ring on the back of the active character. The more lit up it is, the more resolve she has, up till a maximum of 60 resolve, which will be indicated when the entire ring is lit up. There are two ways to gain resolve. One is when party members gain energy particles, which can occur every 3 seconds, and the other way is to use your party members' elemental bursts. The higher the burst cost, the more resolve that will be gained. Resolve will all be consumed when Raiden casts her next elemental burst, and will increase the damage accordingly, depending on how much resolve was gained. Okay, so now that you know what resolve does, we'll discuss what Raiden's elemental burst actually does. On its cast, Raiden will do an initial big slash, and all of her follow-ups, including her normal, charge, and plunge attacks, will deal electro damage. This electro infusion cannot be overridden. She will have this infusion for the next 7 seconds, during which Raiden can also restore energy for her whole party when her attacks hit enemies. The scaling of both the damage and the energy restoration from this burst both will increase accordingly with her talent level. Also, her electro-infused attacks are considered burst damage and not normal attack damage. This is why I do not recommend leveling her normal attack talent, since it doesn't actually do anything. For this same reason, however, Raiden's attacks do not work with Beidou's burst. Similar to her skill, the initial slash does not have ICD, but the follow-up attacks follow standard ICD. During this burst window, Raiden also has super armor, so she will not take knockback or get interrupted when she's damaged. Because of how much front-loaded damage this burst deals, it is practically always recommended to burst with Raiden last in a rotation, as she will have gained much more resolve, gained party buffs, as well as being able to restore her entire party's energy during the 7-second window. For DPS Raidens, which should be most people, this burst is a very high priority to level, and in my opinion, always deserving of a crown, since the attribute scaling increase is so high, while being her primary source of damage. Just as a minor optimization tip, the general combo that is recommended to do during her burst is doing N3 CA 3 times into N1 CA. In layman terms, for those of you who don't understand, that just means doing 3 normal attacks into a charge attack 3 times, and then doing 1 normal attack into a charge attack. It's not a combo you always have to follow, but it does provide the most consistently high amount of damage. This burst has an 11-second downtime, costs 90 energy, and does not snapshot buffs. And just very briefly, I want to talk about Raiden's A4, which increases the energy generation from her burst, as well as granting additional electro damage bonus, scaling off her energy recharge. As an example, my Raiden has 286 energy recharge, which grants her a total of 74.5% electro damage bonus. Because of this extra percentage damage bonus, it allows Raiden to be a bit more flexible in her build paths, with attack percent main stat being a viable substitute for both an energy recharge Sans or Electro Goblet, depending on the build. I will go over her builds later in the artifacts section. Raiden's weapon options are very straightforward, and we'll go over all of them in detail in order of star rarity as usual. Engulfing Lightning. This weapon is unconditionally the best option for Raiden's burst damage. It grants a ton of energy recharge and converts Raiden's total energy recharge into attack. As you can see, with Raiden not in the party, I have 1771 attack. With the Engulfing Lightning passive active, I now have over 2200 attack, which is a massive jump. Additionally, it also grants her extra energy recharge after she uses her burst, increasing her attack, electro damage bonus from her A4, as well as her energy generation for herself and her party. This weapon synergizes perfectly with her kit and is thus the best option for her. However, I do not recommend pulling for this weapon if you don't already have it, if you are a low spender or free-to-play player. This is because her free-to-play option, the Catch, performs incredibly well even when compared to this weapon. For more info, please watch my previous video comparing these two weapons and why I do not recommend pulling the Engulfing Lightning. Staff of Homa. Raiden's second best option is unsurprisingly going to be the Staff of Homa. It has a ton of crit damage and increases her attack by a fairly large amount. However, the actual performance of this weapon is not that much better than even her 4-star options, but it is a viable option if you happen to have it. Raiden's other 5-star weapons will work just fine, but I generally wouldn't bother using them. Primordial Jadewing Spear is an okay option since Raiden can build stacks during her burst, and the Skyward Spine is also a usable option if for some reason you do not want to fish for the catch. Keep in mind that the Skyward Spine's vacuum blades will not proc during Raiden's burst, since her normal attacks are considered burst damage. Moving on to the 4-star options, Raiden's quintessential free-to-play option is the Catch. The passive is tailored for Raiden, increasing her burst damage by 32%, while giving you a ton of energy recharge in its substat. It also grants you 12% extra crit rate for your burst, making artifact stat balancing a little bit easier. This weapon is remarkably strong for a 4-star, and its biggest weakness is that you have to fish for countless hours for it. I will always recommend this weapon to anyone with Raiden, as it's just the easiest option and best option honestly to use. Again, please watch the video where I compared this weapon to the Engulfing Lightning, as that might better demonstrate this weapon's strength. Wavebreaker's Fin. This weapon is actually quite special. With refinements and the right party loadout, this can actually perform better than any other 4-star and even some 5-star options. However, it has attack percent as a substat, so you are forced to run both an energy recharge sands as well as an electro goblet for an optimal build. It also doesn't help that this is an uncommon 4-star weapon, meaning that you will have to pull on very specific weapons banners that carry it to refine. I still generally recommend the catch over this weapon since it's easier to build around, but it is still a very strong option if you happen to have it. As a copium option, the Favonius Lance is a usable weapon on Raiden. However, it massively loses out to every other option listed, and considering the catch is completely free-to-play obtainable and refinable, I don't usually recommend this weapon. Dragon's Bane. Finally, we have the one unique option on this list. All of the previous options have been for Raiden's burst damage, while this is specifically for Hyperbloom Raiden. Dragon's Bane provides an absurd amount of elemental mastery, which is the only stat you need to worry about when you build a Hyperbloom Raiden. The passive is a little wasted, but that's not really important for this playstyle. Moving on to artifact stats. Getting the easy one out of the way first, Hyperbloom Raidens only have to focus on EM on all of the main stats, as well as the substats on the flower and feather. With this kind of setup, it shouldn't be too hard getting over 8 to 900 EM. For the more traditional Raiden Shogun players, your Sands and Goblet main stats will highly depend on both your weapon as well as your substat quality. Generally, the Sands should be energy recharge, while the Goblet should generally be electro damage bonus. However, both of them can be substituted for attack percent if you have much better substats on them. I should mention, however, that you should not use an attack Goblet if you are also using an attack Sands, and vice versa. This is because you'll be stacking on too much attack, which has massive diminishing returns, especially in a full team scenario. An attack Goblet can also be much better for players who use 4-star weapons, as 4-star weapons usually mean that your attack will be very low if you use an Electro Goblet. Just to throw it out there, if you specifically play an Aggravate Raiden, you can use an Elemental Mastery Sands as well, though the damage difference between it and attack percent and energy recharge is often very minimal anyways. Raiden is very flexible with her artifacts, so just test and see what works best for both her and her team. Just like any standard DPS build, I recommend targeting at least 60% crit rate and optimally over 70%. Make sure to factor in the 12% crit rate from the catch if you are using that weapon. Assuming you aren't using a crit weapon, your crit damage should at least be 120 to 130%. For my non-engulfing lightning players, I recommend hitting around 220% energy recharge, but not going over 250%. This is because you will start to have diminishing returns on DPS when you have too much energy recharge, though it would be better for her support potential. For my engulfing lightning gamers, I highly recommend getting over 250% to around 300% energy recharge, which shouldn't be too difficult as the engulfing lightning already gives 55% energy recharge and an ER Sands gives 51%, so you only need a few substats worth of energy recharge to hit that target value. Keep in mind that the engulfing lightning also gives additional energy recharge after using your burst. Moving on to artifact set recommendations, there is only one clear option for Raiden's burst damage, and that is 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. For Raiden's burst damage, there is no second best option. This 4-piece set bonus converts her energy recharge into percentage damage bonus for her elemental burst, and completely synergizes with her kit, more so if you have the engulfing lightning. Keep in mind that the bonus does cap out at 300% energy recharge, so going beyond that is going to have a little bit of diminishing returns on damage. This is one of the few situations where I do feel the set is a little worth forcing, but as I always say, if you have really bad substats, then it might not be worth forcing for Emblem until you get a decent set. If you play a Hyperbloom Raiden, the best clear option is Flower of Paradise Lost. This maximizes her Hyperbloom damage, but it's not a resin efficient artifact domain to farm unless you also have Wanderer. If you don't want to farm for this set, using 4-piece Gilded Dreams, making her a 4-piece Deepwood holder, or any combination of 2-piece Elemental Mastery plus 80 sets will all also perform just fine. On to team comps. Raiden is pretty flexible and can be slotted in as a main DPS or burst DPS. A tried and true team is the Raiden National, or Rational, which usually consists of Bennett, Xiangling, and Xingqiu, with one of them occasionally being swapped out for Kazuha. All of these characters are burst dependent, which helps feed Raiden's resolve, while Raiden can offset their energy requirements thanks to her burst, while also being the main DPS. This is a very free-to-play friendly team comp, and performs very well even in the Abyss. Alternatively, you can also run a full Hypercarry comp, which usually consists of Sarah, Bennett, and Kazuha in the party. Sarah can also be swapped out for Fischl or Yae Miko if you do not have Sarah at Constellation 6. This team maximizes Raiden's own burst damage and also scales with money the best. This will usually be her strongest team comp if you have her at Constellation 2 and above. Another way to use Raiden as a carry is with aggravate teams, normally including Nahida or Dendro Traveler. This team will often lose out to the pure Electro Hypercarry team in terms of front-loaded damage, but has overall more consistent DPS. So this team might be better if you cannot one-cycle an Abyss Chamber in under 3 rotations. Raiden can also be used as a support or burst DPS in physical teams. By physical teams, I mean only with Eula. Eula can benefit from Raiden's Electro application, while Raiden can help offset Eula's high burst cost while filling in on her downtime. Finally, for Hyperbloom Raiden, the team comp is very simple. You will need a Dendro applicator, like Nahida or Traveler, an on or off-field Hydro applicator, like Xingqiu, Yelan, Ayato, Kokomi, Mona, etc, and then a flex slot that can be filled in by someone like a healer if you don't already have one. The upcoming Yao Yao will likely be a very good fit for this role. This team comp has a very autopilot playstyle, as all you need to do is activate Raiden's skill, then continuously trigger blooms with your Hydro and Dendro characters. If you happen to have Nahida at Constellation 2, this team gains very significant value. This is also one of the lowest investment teams to make, as none of the party members need good artifacts to work well. Raiden has some of the best early constellations in the game, so let's go over them in detail. Raiden C1 greatly improves her resolve generation. The strength of this constellation will vary greatly depending on your party type, and IMO, its only useful place is in the Abyss. For those of you who don't know, Raiden's resolve always resets to 0 at the start of a domain, so being able to gain resolve much faster will increase her burst damage by a decent amount for the first rotation. This constellation is okay, but ultimately is a bit situational and also is completely useless for Hyperbloom Raidens. Constellation 2 is the biggest DPS hike for an early constellation in this game. With this, Raiden's burst and its follow-up slashes will ignore 60% of the opponent's defense. Depending on the build and team, this can amount to a 30 to 50% damage increase, which is huge. If you wanted the best value DPS constellation in the game, this is it. This constellation being so early is also why I do not recommend pulling the Engulfing Lightning, as this is just a much overall better value from a power to Primogen perspective. I should clarify that Raiden is still a very good DPS at C0, and no one should feel like they have to pull C2 for good damage. C2 merely skyrockets her damage and solidifies her position as one of the best main DPSs in the game. Constellation 3 and 5 increase her burst and skills talent levels by 3 levels respectively. C3 in particular is quite strong, as it increases her burst damage by a very significant amount, around 16% for my own Raiden. This is also the final stopping point I recommend for Raiden's constellations. From here on out, her other constellations do not increase her burst damage, which is why I do not recommend pulling for them. Constellation 4. Pretty self-explanatory constellation, and is nice for the rest of the party's team damage. Finally, her Constellation 6 will decrease the cooldown of her teammates' bursts for a maximum of 5 seconds. Practically speaking though, this merely reduces her actual full rotation time by around 2 to 3 seconds. This constellation isn't really super useful, as Raiden's own cooldown is quite long, and reducing her teammates' rotations might end up making you not align with Raiden's own burst cooldown once it's her turn on the field, since this constellation only applies to her teammates and not herself. Its value will highly depend on the team you are running. Overall, Raiden has, in my opinion, the best value constellations in the game. Her C2 and C3 are incredible stopping points and provide the highest power to primogem ratio out of any other character. So if you're going to get any 5-star constellations for account strength, Raiden is one of the best ones to go for. Finally, onto the Abyss Showcase. I'll be using my friend's account with a Constellation 0 Raiden. I didn't want to use my own, as mine is C3, which isn't super relatable to most people. She will be in a standard pure Electro Hypercarry team on the top half of Abyss 12. Thank you everyone for watching this Raiden Shogun guide. I hope this was helpful, and I wish everyone the best of luck building Raiden Shogun. Do check out twitch.tv/DukeKC as well, where I often stream Genshin Impact. If you enjoyed, please stick around for future guides. Thanks once again for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Take care.